and welcome to my presentation, The End of Data Hide and Seek, Tearing Down the Barriers for Data Discovery. My name is Jonny Reichwald. I work as an analytics platform lead at EQT. It's a private equity company based in Stockholm, Sweden. We are a global company, so we have offices all over the world, but the tech department is mostly based in Stockholm. And if you're not too familiar with what private equity is, I will give you a small crash course in 1 minute, and you'll be experts after that. So we are a purpose-driven global investment organization focused on active ownership strategies, investing in, owning, and developing companies and real assets. In numbers, we have close to 120 billion euros in fee-generating assets under management, distributed over 48 active funds, and we have 1,796 full-time employees. And you might number how I can have such an exact number, and that's due to our great data that we have in our DBT core contracts that we'll get into later. We do not operate our funds like you're used to. They are not open-ended. It means they have a start date and they have an end date. And the life cycle looks like this. It starts with a formation period where we do capital raising, we do deal sourcing, and we do investments. And investments mean that we essentially buy companies. That is followed by a management period where we manage and improve our portfolio companies to create value. And this lasts for 5, 7, maybe even 10 years. And then we get to an exit period where we divest our portfolio companies and distribute the capital gains as well. And now that you are private equity experts, we can start deep diving here a little bit. All of these steps create data. The deal processes, the fund operations, and the client relations. And we will do a little bit of a case study on the fund operations part, because they had a very interesting ask for us about a year ago. And worth mentioning as well, the data that we generate, it's not like where Amazon, we have billion and billion of rows, where each row is a transaction. It's more a couple of rows per day, but they are highly complex, and the relationships between our portfolio companies is not super straightforward to dive into. So the ask we got was, we have a list of over 200 KPIs. Can you build a dashboard for that? And these are not like super straightforward KPIs. They require a lot of the underlying data. It will take a lot of time to build this. So as the central data team, we are faced with a little bit of a problem here, because if you try to answer this honestly, we can say, it's a bit tricky. It will probably take like 10 years or something. And as a data team, supposedly this is what you do. It's not a great answer. So ideally, what you would like to answer is, we will not build it for you. We will help you build it. And we will provide you with all of the data that you need, all the tooling that you need, and we'll make sure that the data is available, easy for you to interact with. But to get into this state, you need really well-governed data. And this is a huge challenge. So how did we tackle this? Looking at the agenda here, we will start by looking at how we evolved our ways of working with data. Then we will look at how we have been enabling discoverability of the data. And also how data governance supercharges LLM. And finally, we will look at some of the key takeaways from this. So, taking it from the beginning, how we have been evolving our way of working with data, where we're coming from and where we're heading. Our old way of working was that we had a very centralized team that built all of the reports, owned all of the reports, and we built really impressive reports, pixel perfect, all the data was perfect, everything was great, and anyone within the data team could build essentially anything. And then you might ask, what's wrong with this? This sounds great. But as we were growing, we hit some issues. Our backlog was always growing. It took longer and longer to actually deliver any reports. And also the learning curve became really steep for new team members in the data team. So in order to address this, we decided to split up into something we call value streams, also known as domains, and to this crowd, the most common term is probably data mesh. We did this in order to create self-serve data sets within each value stream, and anyone within the organization supposedly should be able to build their own data products using our self-serve data sets. But to accomplish this, obviously, you need very well-governed data. So we have been trying to govern the data for quite a while now, and we've made some learnings. We have actually tried and failed with enterprise data governance platforms. They are very much focused on having a centralized governance team that sits and does all of the governance, but our strategy is more towards having a distributed team, and this makes it very hard to accomplish this. We also thought it was a great idea to have a collaborative but manual data point documentation. I guess you can guess what happened. It got out of sync with reality really quickly. So it wasn't such a great idea. We've also made some observations about what gives most traction when doing data governance. Carrots work in the long term, and whips work for a week or two. And what I mean with that is that in your transformational journey, if you provide tools that makes the life easier for your end user and business users, they will readily adopt that and continue using that. If you have a great plan, but the tools you provide are like, they have to jump through hoops and it takes longer time than they're used to, they will probably do it if you tell them for a little while, but quite quickly they will stop doing that. Also, documentation is super important. Even for non-developers, it must be easy to find and navigate. I mean, the DBT documentation is great, but it's not that easy to find for people that are not developers. And also, you need really low barriers for data access. Complicated setup is detrimental to adoption. If you go to an Excel user and tell them, here's an ODBC driver, you can download that, connect to the database, and I mean, their eyes will just glaze over and you have lost them probably in a couple of minutes. All right, so given this data mesh ambition that we have and the learnings we have done in the data governance domain, what have we done to enable discovery? We have built something we call the Analytics Hub. It's a single entry point through our intranet, deeply connected to our tools and platforms that everyone within EQT can view. And I will try to play a little video here with sound. We'll see how that works. Here we go. My name is Jonny Reichwald, and I lead the Analytics and BI team. We have built the Analytics Hub, which is your entry point for all your data-related needs. It gives you a centralized overview of data that can be used for analytical purposes, enabling us to become a more data-driven organization. This is done through the three main categories: learning resources, reports, and datasets. Let's take a closer look. It can be found under our EQT. Starting with the learning resources, you can find material about how to find reports, how to create reports, and documentation for more advanced users. The second category, the report catalog, makes it easy to find the Power BI reports you're looking for. Lastly, we have the dataset catalog, showing what we call our core datasets. These represent fundamental dimensions of EQT's operations, such as workforce, portfolio companies, foreign exchange rates, invoices, and many others. For each dataset, you can find metadata about ownership and detailed information about its content. All right, and now unfortunately it turned black, but the last thing we saw was the core datasets. And those are what we're most proud of. They are high quality, well documented, and available to everyone within EQT. And they map pretty much one-to-one to DBT exposures, and they in turn depend on the underlying DBT contracts. the big difference is that we have added a lot of things to the meta tag. So we have a strict schema that you have to follow, where we define things such as tech owners, business owners, how to contact them, instructions for how to use the data, even example queries for selecting the data. And at the bottom, I hope you can see it, we also have some SLA definitions, like if it contains history, if the data is mutable, if it can change over time, essentially, and also the maximum age. And these are not strictly enforced, but they're more for helping the users to make decisions about how they can use the data. It could even be operational use cases. So it's very important to know the maximum age then. So given our core data contracts then, how do we pull them out? We use the dbt discovery API to pull it out with a GraphQL query that we see here on the screen. And what we have done is that we tag these contracts with just simply core contracts, and we can add it as a filter in the query. And as you can see here as well, we pull the metadata tag with all the contained information, and we also pull all of the parent IDs for the actual tables. And then we can pull out the column definitions and descriptions for those as well to use in whatever way we want. And then, of course, we have some plumbing on top of this with some cloud functions pushing data around in different systems. But we'll not deep dive into that right now. As you might know, documentation is not the favorite topic for developers. Once you have built something, you just want to ship it and start building the new next great thing. But here we have a very interesting thing. The data governance work can actually supercharge LLMs. And this is a huge carrot for our users to actually document the data and do it properly. Because if they don't do that, the LLMs will not be able to understand the data. That's the key here. So that has proven to be really valuable for us, actually. So what are we doing with LLMs then? So this is our chatbot. There are many like it, but this is ours. It's a Slack bot that interacts with the core data set in a low friction and familiar environment, also known as Slack. When you ask a question, it replies with a SQL query and also the actual result from the SQL query. We have also created a feedback loop where you can annotate if it's correct or incorrect, and we can use that data later on for evaluating performance, benchmark against other tools, and also in the future we hope to use it for fine-tuning the data and things like that. And this is very much experimental work. It's available to everyone, but we're not making any guarantees that the data will be correct or anything like that. So it's mostly for tech people right now. So looking a little bit on the architecture for that one, from 10,000 feet it looks something like this. You have an equitarian, which means an employee at EQT, asking a question to Slack. Slack in turn calls a cloud function, and then that in turn returns a reply and gives it to the end user. And obviously there's a lot of logic and magic going on in this little box. So let's deep dive into that one. Here's the infrastructure. We have one function, the response function, that just keeps Slack happy. You have to be super quick in the reply to that one and just say, hey, I'm alive. But that one in turn pushes a pub/sub message that gets consumed by the ask function. The ask function is the function that does all of the heavy lifting. The first thing it does when it gets query or question is that it queries a vector database for the context regarding with regard to this question that was asked. And that is metadata that could be related to the question that is asked. Then it concatenates this context together with the question and prompts with the question, hey, OpenAI, write a SQL query for me. So you send that to OpenAI, get back a SQL query, and then we send that to Snowflake, which is our data warehouse. And that in turn returns the data. Then we do some formatting and send it back to Slack for the end user to see. And at the bottom here, you can see the vector database. That is also updated with data, metadata, for a training function that it's not run each time you run a query, it's asynchronously run with all of the data, like the information schema from the database, example queries from the metadata that we saw earlier in the core contract definitions. And having worked with this for a little while, we made some learnings as well. Well-structured metadata of high quality is a prerequisite for useful LLM interactions. Without that, you will not get anywhere. Also, it's all about the context. No matter what promises you're told by any slick salesperson or anything, under the hood, always, there is an LLM, and the only thing that takes as input is a text string, essentially. So it's all about how you format that, what you provide in that. And that is what enables the LLM to return a good answer. Also, LLM models, they come and go, but our data will remain the key enabler. So we put a lot of focus on curating our data, keeping that in great shape. Because if we spend a lot of time on the prompt engineering part, then we switch the engine out, and then that behaves differently. So it's not really worth spending so much time on that, I would say. It's more important to have the good data. And then we have the final learning. The LLM is still susceptible to prompt injections, potentially setting things on fire. Here you can see that we had a little visit from Bobby Tables, trying to update all our data. And this is the way it is. We do have some checks in place, and I mean it can't really mess things up seriously, but it's still hard to avoid issues like this. And I've seen there are a lot of other vendors and other people here doing similar things, so it's very interesting to see where this will lead in a couple of years. All right, so let's jump into the key takeaways, and also look at what happened to the 200 KPIs that I mentioned at the beginning. Since we were talking about chatbot, we can start with that one. Our databot outperforms commercial alternatives with an accuracy of 81% on curated queries, including basic queries, aggregation queries, math queries, joins over several tables. And we got some amazing feedback from our users, like for just exploring the data and trying to figure out how it works. It has proven to be a really valuable tool. And looking at this plot, I mean, we are way ahead of OpenAI, Snowflake, Microsoft. Are we much smarter than the aggregated brains of all of these companies? Answer is obviously yes, but how come? And I think the weasel word here is curated queries. These are queries related to our dataset. We know everything about it, and we can create a prompt that fits very well to our dataset. And I think this will be a huge challenge to all of the people trying to create solutions that are of a more generic nature. But at the same time, I mean, we're not married to this solution. So if anything else comes around, we might switch over to that as well. We'll see. Time will tell. Also today, we actually have non-data people building their own reports and analyzing data on their own, using the core datasets that are enabled by the dbt data contracts and the dbt discovery API. And the stack we're using right now, we use dbt Cloud. We do a lot of things in Power BI. You can connect in Excel to the Power BI datasets, so you can actually query the data directly there. And we push down the user credentials to Snowflake. So you can do row-level security and things like that in the Snowflake layer, which is great. Also, we use Hex, and everyone has access to Snowflake, but it's not a super user-friendly tool, so not that many business people are using Snowflake. And for the fund operation KPIs, the initial list, when we were pushing back a little bit and said, we cannot just build this for you, so it has been revised and it has been brought down to 40 KPIs, which I think makes perfect sense. And the Power BI report built by the fund operations team now are actually using the core data sets. And this is reducing the time to deliver and turnaround time because they can manage the report on their own now. Of these KPIs, 5 are fully transitioned to using the core datasets, and others are in progress. And we don't have core datasets for solving all of the KPI questions yet, but that is a work in progress, and hopefully someday we will reach 100% there as well. And when talking with the fund operations team, they have made some comments. First off, they're moving from a manual process to leveraging the core datasets. They see a great value in that. Having trustworthy data forces KPI owners to take them seriously. And lastly, ownership has increased, resulting in people tracking the KPIs closely. And I think this last point is very related to the one above. If you trust the data, if you know these are the numbers that are correct, I can't argue with that, then you have to act on them. Because otherwise, if a KPI points in the wrong direction, you can just say, yeah, but I think the data is wrong, or it's... But if you know this is the real data, then you need to act. And this has proven to be really powerful to them. So, trying to predict the future here a little bit. What are we trying to do next? We are very interested in the semantic layer. We want to leverage the additional layer of calculations and metadata we can get from that. And also seeing if we can use it to infer the relationships between tables. Right now, we are a little bit limited due to some technical constraints in the semantic layer, but hopefully that will be resolved soon. Also, we want deeper integrations between the systems. If you are in the analytics hub on the intranet, it would be super nice to just see an example query for getting data, click on that, have it open a Hex notebook for you with the query already populated. And I don't know if anyone from Hex is in the room, but please steal this idea. Also want to improve the data bot. For example, we would like to have a few shot prompts like hinting, yeah, this looks great, but can you tweak it a little bit like this and make the answer better? And based on this, it might be interesting to explore the alternative of having a multi-agent solution where you have essentially a DAG of LLMs and possibly other things as well, where you transition between the states for asking questions maybe not just related to data, but the relationships between the tables and things like that. All right, that is all I had to present. If you have any questions, you can email me at the address you see on the screen here, or you can just come and chat with me here. And I think we have a couple of minutes for questions in the room here right now as well. Thank you. Do we want a mic or should... Yep. Okay, yeah, shoot. Adoption for what? Could you repeat that? Yeah, okay. So the question is, how did we get traction and adoption for this initiative within the organization? And that is a very long and very hard topic. It's not easy, let me say as much. But I would say you have to really describe where we're coming from, what challenges we have, and why we have to do this transition. Not everyone are interested in being self-service users. They want everything delivered on a silver platter. But I don't think there's a silver bullet. You just have to work really hard on this and talk. Yes?
Did you consider, or do you use a medallion architecture with like bronze, silver, gold? It sounds like your core models are basically your gold layer.
Okay, so the question was if we use bronze, silver, gold model, the medallion model, and we do not. And that is for the reason that if you use that, it easily gets confused with having a staging layer for the data, somewhat normalized and so on. What we want to do is categorize the end layer. Like, this is good quality data, this is still the end layer, but it's maybe not as good. So that's the layering we're trying to do. Okay, so the question was if we have a record of known good queries, is that correct? And we do have, I mean, we log all the questions first, so we can review them. We haven't created any structured way of doing that yet, but we also have the example queries. You saw them in the contract definitions earlier. And we use that when we prompt the LLM as well. And that hints a little bit how it can use the data. All right. Let's call it a wrap. Thank you all.